Well, it's a thrill to be here. Thank you to IABC BC for this invitation. I'm here to share some insights from my career and 5 lessons in 5 minutes. So my presentation is really more chronological. I'm going to sort of start from the beginning and identify some things that I learned along the way. I started a long time ago in the mid-1980s on the agency side. And I worked with some big clients, and one of them was the real estate developer at Metrotown. And in those days, Metrotown was just a field. There were no big high-rises and no shopping centers. And so it was very competitive and very stressful times when they were digging up the ground there. And one thing I learned from that experience was that how important it was to understand the industry, translate the language into some really meaningful messages for all of the different stakeholders. It was also a time of technology change. In 1984, Apple introduced the first desktop publishing technology, and we were early adopters then. And so one of the key lessons that I learned was to be an early adopter of technology. And certainly all of you in this room understand the value of technology and how important it is today. So lesson number 1 is to adopt technology early and be prepared to defend technology in your communication strategy. That is more important now than ever before. So that was lesson number 1. Second lesson I learned was when I joined a NASDAQ-listed automotive technology company. It was a startup, and they had some amazing technology that was leading edge at the time. I knew nothing about automotive technology. I had to decipher engineering reports and data and manuals into some very simple language that was relevant to investors, to the board, to analysts, to media, and so on. And that's when I started to really understand the power of language. And some of those acronyms that I mentioned earlier, it started then. You know, you have to understand the industry and translate those acronyms into some very meaningful messages. So that was the second lesson, was to understand the language and translate it into 27 words. If you can't translate that message into 27 words, and now, 140 characters, then you've lost your audience. So that was lesson number 2. Lesson number 3 happened when I moved into the hotel business. I spent a number of years with a very large organization, and it was across Canada. We had 6,000 or 7,000 employees, and I was the corporate director of marketing, and we had 12 brands, and I was responsible for the marketing communications for 12 brands. And what I learned then was, you have to, again, dive in, understand the language, and turning that into some messages for guests, for shareholders, and that continued right through to this very day. One thing that happened in those days was the advent of the internet. At that time, most hotels weren't really online. And so along came Travelocity and Expedia, and they just transformed the industry. And within 6 or 7 months, we had to build 25 websites for all of these different hotels. And the third lesson that I learned was, again, adopt a new technology and don't be afraid of change. We had to readjust all of our marketing communication strategies and align them to online strategies, because that's the way the industry was transforming. So that was message number 3. Message number 4 was when I joined with the Canadian Cancer Society, a great organization, a national cancer organization that raises about $180 million a year for cancer research programs and services. That was a very complex organization as well, and a number of different audiences that we had to deal with. We had to deal with government, local, national governments, opposition members, advocates, researchers, and a lot of community partners. And one thing that I discovered there was, when you get presented an opportunity, which I did, seize it. I was very fortunate to lead a pan-Canadian strategy to reposition the Canadian Cancer Society at that time, and it was transforming. That was over and above all the work that I had, but I said, okay, I'll lead it. And that's the other thing I'd like to share, is when you get an opportunity or you see an opportunity, put your hand up. It may mean more work, but again, it's one of those things that will help build your career. The final message that I'd like to leave with you is, is from some contracts that I'm working on right now. I'm a management consultant, and currently I have a couple of big projects. One is I oversee the BMO Vancouver Marathon. It's managed by the Vancouver International Marathon Society, and I was brought in to help rebuild the organization and take the event to the world stage. And so I've entered the world of sports brands, sport events, and it's highly competitive. And what I learned there was to dream big. Surround yourself by very compelling, passionate people, and you'll succeed. So those are my 5 key messages, and I hope that you'll follow those.